Thank you very much for coming to our talk today on building a 5-star Kubernetes hotel. We'll introduce ourselves and then dive straight in because we want to make the most of the 30 minutes. So my name is Rachael Wonnacott, and I'm the technical product owner for the Kubernetes platform at Fidelity International. I'll let him introduce himself, but this is Dean Fuller, who has the wonderful job of looking after me.
Thank you, Rachel. So hi, everybody. I'm Dean Fuller. I look after what is known as developer platform engineering at Fidelity. Some of you might have heard of Fidelity International. You may have pensions or personal investments with them. But Fidelity have been around since 1969. We operate in 27 countries, and we look after 950 billion of people's money. So Fidelity have actually been on our cloud journey since 2013. And that first started with CloudFoundry on-premise, and it's actually been hugely successful in the organization. Over the last 7 years, we've been on our public cloud journey in the way of AWS and Azure, and that supports the 2,500 developers we have at Fidelity, delivering all the capabilities for our customers and internal systems. So today you're going to hear me and Rachel talk about our customers. We follow the product model here at Fidelity, so when we're talking about customers, we're talking about our internal app devs at Fidelity. So let's get started on what that cloud model and operating model looks like at Fidelity. So as I say, we went into cloud 7 years ago, and we very much did it on a very purist DevOps approach. And the way we framed it is the cloud house, effectively. Me and my platform engineering teams in the organization would go and build the foundations for the house, and we would then hand that over to our customers to then go and be able to build their houses that might host the customer applications or the internal business applications. And it was hugely successful when we launched this 7 years ago. And today in Fidelity, we have over 600 houses across the organization where we've given people the freedom to go and build what they need for the organization. Now, Rachel has an absolutely fantastic video on this in the QR code you'll see in the corner there. So I highly recommend you go away and take some time to watch that if you get a moment. But with this comes a shared responsibility model. The cloud platform team would go and deliver the foundation. So if you think of that as a house, it would be the water main coming into the house. But then the app teams would then be responsible for building that house and everything inside that house. So if that water main bursts, that's absolutely the cloud platform team's responsibility to go fix. But if a tap stops working in a bathroom or a kitchen, or you have a leak for whatever reason, that's the app team's responsibility. And the app teams loved it. Absolutely loved it. It drove huge amounts of innovation in the organization, and we had some fantastic outcomes. And if we start to look at as to how our cloud journey then went, first it accelerated, but as time went on, it started to slow and slow and slow until it really petered out. And we're thinking to ourselves, what's going on? We've given everybody the dream here. Like, they can go and build their own applications. Why is it slowing down? So like any good product owner, we had to go and sit down and listen to our customers. So when we went and met them, they're all looking a little bit like this. We're like, what's wrong? We've given you the dream here. You can do anything you want in the cloud within reason. We set the safeguards and controls, but you can go and build all those fantastic applications. And then one of the app dev team leaders come along to me and he said, Dean, I would love to focus on focus on core business delivery and not worry too much about the underlying infrastructure. Not because I don't want to, but because I would rather like the experts to manage it, and I manage my business applications. I think it's fair to say when I first heard that, I was like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. We've given you everything you could want. What is going on here? But actually, we heard this message again and again and again. And then we had to start thinking, do our app dev teams really want to worry about infrastructure? Are the 2,500 developers we've got really cut out for managing infrastructure? Is that the best use of their time? And actually, so if it's not the best use of their time, how can we deliver something that lets them focus on their apps and not all of that infrastructure that they don't want to manage today? So we went away and thought about this. We've got the cloud analogy. What else could we do? So I introduced the cloud container hotel. So building on that analogy, we thought to ourselves, what if we built a hotel this time? Rather than just delivering the foundations, we'd provide the entire hotel for the organization. We would provide hotel rooms that we would then give out to our app devs team, but all of those hotels would look the same and be very opinionated. So this time, if a leak occurred in the kitchen or the bathroom or one of those hotel rooms, because they all look the same, we would be in a position as a platform engineering team to take away and fix that. We could then let our customers focus on delivering business value, but we would then go and focus on all the platform engineering and infrastructure went there around that. So we went back to the app devs and said, what do you think of the hotel model? And it was party time again at Fidelity. The hotel was everything they wanted. It can now start to give them the time to focus on the business applications and not worry so much about everything that comes with that, like the infrastructure. So that was all great. All the developers are off and happy and excited and partying over somewhere. Back behind the scenes, we're scratching our heads going, right, we've sold the hotel, but how are we going to do this? Fortunately for me, I had Rachael in the team. So, Rachael, how are we going to do this?
So Dean had the really lovely job of selling the vision, which got everyone very excited. And I had the slightly more difficult job of figuring out how we were going to deliver on that vision. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why we made the choices that we did. So Dean has mentioned that we started with CloudFoundry, and actually our developers, for the most part, really loved this. It's a thin, viable platform because it's very opinionated, and it helped have that standardization across the organization. But over time, we recognized that the CloudFoundry community was diminishing. And over the last 10 years, given the number of you in the audience, I think it's fair to say that Kubernetes has dominated the market. So we needed to bear that in mind. We work with a lot of third parties, as any large organization probably does. We don't build everything from scratch. We do buy, and we do have mergers between those pieces of software. And we found that lots of these third parties were expecting Kubernetes to be within our organization, be it they providing Helm charts or something of that nature. Also, from a career vitality perspective, we want to have the best engineers, and to have the best engineers, you probably want to be using the best technologies, and we felt that that career vitality would come with Kubernetes, and probably not with CloudFoundry. Finally, we had several business applications that were already tied in with certain products, for example, the Bloomberg API, and they were also expecting Kubernetes to run. So our initial use cases were Kubernetes heavy. MVP. If you have ever done a software engineering ticket as an engineer, or perhaps you're a product owner with a white page problem, you know how difficult it is to decide what minimum really means to you in your minimum viable product. We are a regulated company, so we also have some guardrails that we need to consider when we're thinking of the context of how we're building. Sometimes, in a large organization like ours, it's who shouts the loudest, and we wanted to make sure that we avoided that. And instead, in that lovely binomial distribution, wanted to target that 80% in the middle. So how do I do that? Well, I think about our acceptance criteria, and by virtue of having a platform, for me, by definition, it's going to be multi-tenant, particularly if we want to have those standardized rooms in the hotel that Dean has already told you about. So for me, that MVP comes down to the core functionality of Kubernetes. And what is that? Well, you want to host and run your container somewhere, and you want to have all of that resiliency and scaling that Kubernetes is famous for. And for us, our guardrail and constraint was network security and network isolation. So it's no surprise then that the platform team was the one tinkering with Kubernetes to provide said platform with said network isolation. However, this operating model didn't go down all of that well with some of our app developers who got quite excited that they would be playing with Kubernetes. And when they found out that instead my team would be doing the playing and they would simply be popping their container on top, there was a little bit of dissatisfaction, which is hopefully indicated by this lovingly generated AI image. Right, so I've got to start building. I've mentioned that MVP. What was that definition? We could do a whole talk on this and more, but I wanted to spend just one moment to give a little bit of a thank you to a few of the CNCF projects that we use. It is Cloud Native Con 2 after all. So we've got Cilium as our CNI. We're using Kyverno for policy enforcement, and Carpenter is handling our scaling to zero, which is really quite good for our cost saving, which as a business, very important. So I've now built this wonderful MVP. So Dean, back to you.
So I get a phone call from Rachael one day. She says it's ready. Great. Can I have a look before we show the customers? And she goes, da-da. I was like, wow. Maybe this isn't what I had in mind. So I went back through all the epics and the stories and looked at MVP and gone, actually, Rachael, you've built exactly what we said we would do for MVP. I'm not sure this is what the customers have in mind, though. And when we showed it to them, it was, wow, 1-star motel rather than 5-star hotel like maybe we got all excited about. But actually, so have we upsold this a little bit too much? And should we have been surprised? Maybe not. So we coined this the hotel hype cycle, and we're looking at this through the eyes of our customers and developers here. And should we have been surprised? It's like any other product launch, really. So if we think of our hotel here, and actually at number one here, when we had that engineering trigger, that's when we were hearing that there was too much noise around managing infrastructure for our app devs in Fidelity today. So we sold the dream of the hotel. And that really was that peak of expectation that we were going to have this fantastic hotel service that was going to solve all of Fidelity's development issues. Rachel's team then busily went away and engineered their MVP service. And then very quickly, we hit the trough that is actually the motel, which is what we went live with on day one. And for me, this is the really important point. At this point here, the hotel could have crumbled and fallen down, but actually we were very lucky to have our first customers coming on board who were very vocal, which might have been difficult to hear, but actually the feedback they gave us allowed to drive that path of enlightenment where actually we could start to deliver some of the capability that start to take from a motel actually to a hotel. For me right now, I like to think we're at this finished viable platform place where actually we provide a lot of the capability we need for our developers to move forward, but I'm not sure our developers are ever going to be fully happy with what we have. So Rachel, that's through the eyes of our customers. What did it look like for your team though?
Well, unsurprisingly, it also looks like the Gartner hype cycle, but this time from the lens of platform engineering. When we talk about platforms, we talk a lot about developer experience. I feel like sometimes we forget the engineers, but ultimately they are developers too, and their satisfaction within the organization is also quite important. So we introduced Kubernetes, and we were super excited. So excited. Career vitality, an actual greenfield project. How often do you get to go into an organization with lots of money and get to design something completely from scratch? Exactly how you want it. All of the best practices that you wanted to see. But we realized quite quickly that our customer base was CloudFoundry users. And so we slooped down into the trough of disillusionment very fast. CloudFoundry is a PaaS, a platform as a service, out of the box. Kubernetes is not. And so I realized what we were trying to do was rebuild CloudFoundry, this time in Kubernetes. Not sure exactly why we would want to do that. There's a lot of complexity in doing so, and I realized that barrier to entry was going to be quite high. We had a new operating model, and the team that had previously been running the CloudFoundry platform expected DevOps in a purist fashion. It was, you build it, you own it, you run it. We don't touch your app. And that's not quite what we're going for with the hotel operating model, so we needed to adjust our expectations. And we blurred what was previously quite a clear delineation between platform and application, and shifted it slightly more towards the application developer. So features are finally driving enlightenment. We've finally been able to add some of those extra features that are bringing a bit more satisfaction from our customers. But Dean and I are asking ourselves, how far can we go? My platform team can only offer so many services and still have that 2 pizza model. So at some point, it's going to plateau. And I haven't told you what 5 is because we're not really sure just yet. So I'm often quoted in my personal life as saying that dissatisfaction lies in the gap between expectations. And that's what I'm trying to show you on screen. So both of these families have visioned for a hotel that they want to stay in for their holiday. And as you can see, they look quite different. That doesn't necessarily mean that one is more valid than the other, but it does mean that if they go to each other's hotel, they're probably not going to enjoy the experience. My definition and understanding of MVP was to build an infrastructure platform that abstracted that infrastructure from the customers. It wasn't to write their apps. It wasn't necessary to offer guidance on architecture for their applications. And it also wasn't necessary to build services that might be downstream that an application wants to use. But the developer thought they were getting everything as a hotel service, the full 5-star, all-inclusive resort. And we're not quite ready yet to provide that. So why are we not ready to provide that? Well, we're spending a lot of time running the platform. We build on Amazon EKS, which is fantastic, and that has taken some of the lifting away from us. But as you probably all know, you need add-ons from the CNCF to really make your Kubernetes platform flourish. I've mentioned 3 of the ones that we use already, but we use quite a lot of other open source tools as well. My team look a little bit like this at the moment, which is something I think about on a daily basis. And we have a lot of test flakes. I'm assuming a technical audience, but to be really clear, by flake, I mean a test that is sometimes passing, sometimes failing, and there hasn't been any change to the configuration or code. So you're not really sure whether this is a false positive. What this is indicative of is an environment that's not quite stable. That keeps me up as a product owner. So we need to spend some time fixing that. We're also doing continuous integration in a purist fashion as well, where we're pulling the latest changes immediately from the internet in the open source community straight into a development cluster, and we're running our full suite of tests. We actually destroy and rebuild the cluster every time. So our PR pipeline, it's taking quite a long time to run. The more add-ons that we add, the more tests we need to run, the more flakes there are, and we have an operations model where you do 1 day on queue, which basically means as an engineer that it's your job to deal with all of this. So a little graph. Now, ignore the percentages. I've kind of made a guesstimate just to show you a nice line for illustrative purposes only. And I've got at the bottom here your time in months. So this is from staging and development being built through to non-production go live at 0, which is the motel that we've spoken about, all the way through to prod, and then where we are now, about 10 months later. We had quite a steep rise in operations and what you might call BAU for running the platform until the point that we've gone live. That's simply because we're building out and adding more features, and there's a linear relationship between the number of features and the number of tests that you require. It then plateaued for a little bit while we got comfortable and slowly came down. But as a product owner, I'm kind of hoping that this time spent on looking after the platform was going to come down a bit more quickly so we could start building other features. So where you've got that steeper part on the graph, that's where we made a conscious effort to talk about this in retrospectives and have dedicated epochs for this. But where do we go from here? Well, most likely it's going to look something like this, but there's also a risk that it looks like 2 other scenarios. So the worrying future is that we add on too many features and we simply can't keep up with the maintenance, and that looks something like this. In an ideal world, we continually bring down the number of flakes and time spent on operations, but at the moment it's only declining on that shallow bit here, so we'll have to give you another talk in a year's time and let you know how we're doing. Right. So I have a background in physics, and it's tradition for me to get some mention of physics into my talk. So I'm coining this not the conservation of energy, but instead the conservation of cognitive load. Now, that probably sounds a little bit counterintuitive because we want to get rid of cognitive load. But what I'm saying is, much like energy, it can neither be created nor destroyed. So how far can we actually abstract our infrastructure? Because that cognitive load has to go somewhere. So we built for the acceptance criteria on here for the application teams, but we've sold the hotel model so well that now we have infrastructure use cases wanting to run on our platform as well. To give you an example of some of those, it might be scanning software or something that we're using for authentication. So not your IaaS level infrastructure, but other services that could indeed run on Kubernetes. But we've got a few software engineering challenges to think about here. Blast radius, if we're hosting everything in that one cluster and it goes down, I'm probably going to have my head on the chopping block, and Dean probably too. But also chicken and egg dependencies, which is what we like to talk about a lot in the organization, but what we mean there is cyclical dependencies. So worst case scenario, if we have to rebuild that cluster, but the authentication that requires a prerequisite is hosted on that cluster, we can't get going at all. Right. So to talk about this in layers, Daniel Bryant from Syntasso often talks about the 3 layers from his Java background, so I've kind of stolen this from him. You've got your IaaS at the bottom, which is AWS, and then you can see where I thought I was going to sit in the middle there, which is Kubernetes. And these other infrastructure services that I've mentioned would be parallel to us in the stack. The applications would sit on top. Unfortunately, everyone else thought it would look a little bit like this, where we, Kubernetes, would do all of the heavy lifting, hence that getting a little bit bigger, and we would have infrastructure service sitting on top of us, and then applications on top of that. We need to move that cognitive load somewhere. My team simply cannot run all of the services. We're only about 15 people. So instead, what we're spiking out at the moment, so this is sort of hot off the press, is how can we divide that cognitive load and split it among multiple teams? So I've indicated that here by the potential for a multi-cluster approach where we have clusters for different use cases. Naturally, that reduces the blast radius, but it also means my team isn't on the hook for everything. Right, I think, Dean, you want to ask me if we're going to deliver on our promise.
So, Rachel, are we going to deliver on our promise of that 5-star hotel for our customers?
Wow, that's a good question. Let's get into it.
So why don't I kick off by saying where I think we were at the beginning when we went live. So we've drawn a graph here looking over 5 different pillars of security, resiliency, scaling, capability, and the developer experience. As we mentioned, Fidelity look after 950 billion of people's money, and actually security is a total non-negotiable as part of what we offered. For us, security, we couldn't cut any corners, and we also had to take time to upskill the security teams in the organization as to what we were doing. Kubernetes was brand new to Fidelity. So for us, we spent huge amounts of time and effort investing on that area of security. And actually, that came at the detriment of all of the other areas like resiliency, capability, and DevX. We were very lucky just naturally using Kubernetes comes with great scaling capability. But really, we didn't really deliver on that glossy hotel experience for a customer because we put so much time and effort into other areas. So Rachel, do you want to maybe talk about where you think we are now?
Yeah, please go ahead. So I'm relieved to be able to tell you that we've brought resiliency and scaling up to match where we were with security. But you're probably seeing quite clearly that capability and developer experience are lagging behind. And unfortunately, that's the reality. This does create a problem because we sell the platform typically as about the developer experience, but really it's second to business value. And for the business, we also have audit and compliance, which if you work within a regulated industry is simply non-negotiable. And we spent so much time on those first three pillars that capability and developer experience is lagging behind. So be aware of that if you're starting this from scratch. We are now bringing this forward, and our focus for the next 12 months will absolutely be on capability and developer experience. But I need to be mindful as a product owner that as we expand those features, I don't introduce more operational work that I talked about earlier.
Thank you, Rachel. So the reality is actually, this is sort of where we look right now. There is absolutely a golden path for our customers and developers to go forward and have used the hotel, for example. The hotel's gradually increasing star by star by star, but there's still some way to go. If you stay on that golden path, all's going to be okay, but it looks a little bit scary if you deviate off that path at the minute. But have we done the right thing? Did we go live too early with what we called MVP? And that's a question we've asked ourselves a lot. I think the concern is we could have spent forever engineering the perfect hotel. But actually, the feedback that we got from going live with MVP was things that was never ever part of the conversation earlier on. The features and capabilities that have come since we've gone live have actually driven where we've got the platform to today. And actually, the difficulty in those conversations and the feedback we got around how challenging it was to use the platform, we would never have got the platform to where it was today without that. So it leaves the team in this sort of position right now. We've got CloudFoundry on the left, and we haven't really mentioned this today, but Rachel's team are having to keep CloudFoundry alive at the same time. And we've got the new Kubernetes Hotel on the right. For the team, we want to move away from CloudFoundry, but it's going to be there for probably another 6, 9, 12 months or so. It's been in the organization for 12, 13 years, and there's lots of people very comfortable with that Wild West style hotel maybe. There's still fires every now and again that the team have to put out, and that distracts them from being able to work on those features of the Kubernetes Hotel. So we do need to put a lot of time and effort into supporting our customers transitioning from the old hotel to the new hotel so we can really focus our time and effort on Kubernetes. For us at Fidelity, we're really fortunate to have a fantastic community. Like we've seen this week here at KubeCon, the community at Fidelity around Kubernetes has been huge. And actually many of our customers migrating already spend time helping other customers on that journey. And we also have an enablement function within our engineering group, which also has played a big part in that migration. So I think to wrap things up, for around 5 things we'd ask you to remember from today, if you too were going on a similar journey. We absolutely couldn't have built the hotel without the open source community and some of those plugins that Rachel mentioned today. But beware and be ready for the time and effort that comes in that you need to contribute and support those plugins within your platform. I think it's fair to say we probably oversold the hotel model a little bit too much, and we probably should have spent more time staying closer to the customers as we went through that MVP cycle and continually reinforcing what MVP was going to look like. But what was really, really important was the feedback they gave us. So it's always important to have your first guinea pig customers ready to come on board to your platform and give you that immediate feedback. And then finally, I think the big point that Rachel made, you can't abstract infrastructure. Whilst we might be able to take it away from our customers, it's still Rachel's team that get left with it at the end of the day. So a big thumbs up to Rachel's team for the work they've taken on. And I'm sure they're going to take on loads more into the future. Yeah, Rachel?
Most likely.
And then I guess there's still things we don't know. For us, the infrastructure cluster, we're still a little bit on the fence. Are we actually fueling bad behavior within the organization by running an infrastructure cluster for infrastructure teams that don't want to run infrastructure? I think whilst we recognize some of the capabilities that will run on that cluster will benefit our customers in the long run, like container scanning, for example, we're still not sure whether that's the right thing we should be doing, and maybe actually they should be running their own hotel for their infrastructure. And I think there's still, we don't know what we don't know. We've still got several thousand workloads to migrate onto the hotel, and there's bound to be things that we've not really thought about yet. So again, there's still a big unknown for us going forwards. So I think that's everything we wanted to share with you today. I think we've got 5 minutes left, so happy to take any questions. I think there's a microphone somewhere in the middle of the room. Equally, there's the QR code for our talk today if you'd like to give any feedback. Thank you.
Thank you for your talk. So you started off with a raw vanilla Kubernetes cluster, and then you built a motel and then a hotel. Can you describe some of the features that got you to motel and hotel?
So we're building on top of Amazon EKS, and those three CNCF projects that I've mentioned were those motel versions. So Cilium for the CNI, Kyverno for policy enforcement, and Carpenter for scaling. So I was really looking at this from a very infrastructure lens, where we needed to make sure that it was secure and resilient. We weren't really thinking about other application features. So while moving towards the hotel, we're offering sort of ancillary services, like a database as a service, for example. So as part of your declarative config, you can state that you would also require a database of flavor X of size Y, and that gets sent off with a FIFO queue to a pipeline at the back end that another team is running as a concession, and that gets delivered into your namespace. So when I talk about these other services, it's things that aren't traditionally part of Kubernetes, but you would need inside your cluster or interfacing with your cluster for part of your application development.
Yeah, thank you.
Any more?
No? Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, everyone. Oh, one more.
One more. I have one more quick question. You mentioned about the declarative config for the apps. So do you deploy now all the apps with Helm, or like you plan to use something else like Argo or any of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So we run a centralized Argo service for our customers as part of the hotel model, but people are also free to use other forms of CI/CD in the organization. So we have Jenkins within the org that people are typically using to do their builds, but mostly within the platform for all of those use cases I mentioned that require Helm, it is using Argo.
Cool. Cheers.
Hi, thank you. That was very good, Prezo. Just a quick question on how do you balance new features versus the time that you're spending on maintenance, and how do you prioritize as you have more customers, as you say, going to your hotel? I imagine the number of feature requests is increasing, but also the maintenance work. So how do you strike that balance?
Absolutely. That's probably the most difficult part of my job at the moment, and I'm becoming quite famous for saying no. So what I do with Gareth at the front, who is my lovely BA, we're trying to make sure that we split our time across a number of epics that suits our velocity, with always having one epic spare for platform maintenance. So love to our own code base, as an example. The way that we're looking at that in terms of prioritization is really quite mercenary. It's business value. So we're doing something called big room planning. All of the different areas of the department, so data services, security, enablement, developer platform engineering, all come together and say, this thing is most important to me. It's going to save X number of hours for the developer. It costs X amount of money. This is the perceived benefit. If this benefit is bigger than this one, this gets prioritized, this doesn't.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi. How much do you extract the setup and settings for your developers? Like, do they have to have a lot of Kubernetes knowledge to get into the hotel, or can they just plug and play? And
so it's somewhere in the middle, and I think we'd like to make that more and more abstracted over time. The reality of running Kubernetes is that you do need some understanding of it to design your application to run effectively in Kubernetes. We're quite fortunate that most of our use cases are web applications, so you can design that as a 12-factor app. But you do need to understand like the CLI. So we want teams to be able to go and troubleshoot what they're doing. So kubectl would be an absolute requirement. When we sold the vision, we sort of said to senior leadership that there would be like no knowledge required. The reality is there is a baseline level of knowledge that's here, and we'd like to bring that down. We are also introducing a portal. My personal view is that the orchestration layer should come first, and then you layer the portal on top. But we are looking to do some of that abstraction by having a single entry point using Backstage.
I think some of maybe the plugins like Carpenter, for example, our teams have had to get comfortable with horizontal and vertical scaling, and those are sort of principles they need to understand out of Kubernetes to be able to accommodate things like Carpenter running.
yeah, of course. Thank you.
Hiya. Thanks for the talk. You mentioned that perhaps you thought you released the MVP like too early. Did you find that when you were onboarding like your first customers, did they still work with the old practices and with the old habits? And did that kind of corrupt like the process of rolling that out, and what you thought the best practices for this new platform should be? And did you manage?
I'll take that one to start with. So I think what I've come to realize on my journey as a product owner is that customers will never be fully happy, and I need to accept that I will never be completely liked for that fact. So if you think about the original analogy of an MVP as being a car, you've come to me and said, Rachel, I want a Formula One car. And I go away for a full year, I build you what I think is the perfect car, it's red, it's shiny, it's super fast, you know, Verstappen likes to drive it. You get in, the steering wheel's really far away, and you're like, well, I can't drive this, right? You're Lawson, you've been dropped. Actually, if I'd given you the chassis, we'd immediately have seen that that steering wheel was too far away, but you still wouldn't have been happy with me, because I've given you a chassis, not an F1 car. So I don't think we released MVP too early, because we would never have got that feedback that has made the platform that hosts our applications now. But regardless of where we release that MVP, someone was always going to be unhappy. So to any product owners or technical leads in the room, you need to be comfortable with the fact that you're kind of parenting the organization in that sense, and you're doing stuff for the long run for the good of the organization, but you might not be appreciated for doing it.
Thanks. So how did you kind of guide the developers to use your new practices and things like that?
Do you want to talk about enablement?
Yeah, so we're quite fortunate. We briefly mentioned it in the talk. Within our enterprise engineering function in the organization, we have an enablement function. So whilst we're the platform engineering team, we also have an enablement function. So they work very closely with us to understand what our platforms look like. And then they really roll their sleeves up and get their hands dirty with our customers and app dev teams. So they're actually able to inject themselves or parachute themselves into those app dev teams and try and steer them in the right direction. Equally, they give us feedback and go, Dean, Rachel, that's not working very well. You know, why are we doing it like that? We need to, and they can help influence the direction the platform goes. So that enablement function on top of our platform engineering group really play a huge part there.
And they've got software devs in that group.
Yeah.
So they're people that do have technical background and expertise that are equipped to advise best practice.
Okay, thanks.
All right, I think we're at time. So thank you very much,
Thank you so
everybody.
much.